This setting may feel a bit complicated. Please watch this video at least 3 or 4 times to digest it really well. Again, how do we acquire the real wealth? By only beating real inflation and increasing the buying power. This is our primary option. So, we need to set the inflation targets to beat them. But it is not that easy. In developed countries like United States, Germany, England, we generally witness more stable inflation. Past and future inflations are generally similar. Setting targets are much easier. In developing countries like Turkey, Argentina, Brazil, finding a stable inflation could be really hard. So setting a target inflation to beat will be harder. Generally, we determine the future inflation based on the past inflation. For example, just imagine a country with an inflation 5% right now. We assume that next year the inflation will be between 4 to 6% somewhere. I hope that everything is clear up until right now. In the Trading Economics website, you can find this chart, the CPI data for your country, basically consumer price index changes for your country. This is the official government inflations. This chart basically shows me ongoing yearly inflation, how the price of goods keep changing compared to 1 year ago. Very simple chart. Now, here is the important part. I set my inflation target as the highest inflation record in the last 12 months. As you can see, while I was preparing this document, the highest inflation in the United States in the last 12 months was 3.5%. Now, in the Google Sheet, you will find a setting sheet. Type this number, please. Remember, this is a country and currency-based setting. I'm setting this for dollar-based investments. We will also learn how to make investments in your local countries later on. Now, I set this as my minimum target. This will be my 1x multiple to beat. So, what we will try to do is our agents' buying power must beat this number at bare minimum, the government inflation. If I am investing my money for the dollar-based assets, I need to beat the bare minimum of 3.5% a year at least to protect my buying power. Now, why do I take the highest number in the last 12 months? Because none of us knows the future. Yes, we expect the inflation numbers to be similar with the past year, but we have no idea what will happen in the future. What I try to do here is beat the worst inflation possible happened in the last year if it again happens next year. I assume the worst and try to beat the worst. Simple as that. But remember the first section and investing basic lessons. There are two inflations we need to consider, government and street inflation. We already discussed that people in the United States experience 4 or 5 times more than the government declares. Like government inflation is around 3.5%, but the real people experience like 5 to 15% at least. So I write down 4 as my multiple here. It is a very simple math. It is just a multiplication of 3.5%, which is the government inflation, and the number 4. This gives me an idea, an average street inflation in the United States to beat. So my agents will try to beat the street inflation as well. Now, we settled the government and real street inflation. But again, how do we get really wealthy? The only way to get wealthier is beating the government and street inflation. There's no other choice. We must acquire more buying power than all types of inflations. This brings us to the personal target section. This should be your personal targets, entirely depends on you. There's no rule here. I personally think making like 8 or 16 times more than the bare minimum government inflation is a good way to start. This is why I typed the numbers 8 and 16 here. If my agents can achieve these numbers, I will get richer and richer every year, wealthier with increased buying power. Simple as that. In your Excel sheet, all this auto-calculated. Please do not worry. All you need to do is set the basic government inflation and the multiple numbers. That's it. I created a table for you to find out your multiple numbers easily. The government inflation is the easiest. It is the highest inflation number in the last 12 months. So our multiply is 1x, our base. Street inflation, you need to do some research here. Go ask people. Compare grocery price changes, rent price changes, changes in the living cost every year. How is the yearly change happening here? Find your multiple by asking this question. How many more times than the government inflation do I need to account for to cover street inflation? Then comes the personal targets. You already know a basic understanding in the yearly price changes. And you need to ask this question to yourself. How many times more than the government inflation do I need to account for to increase my true wealth, increase my buying powers? And this will give you some multiple. But you need to be reasonable here and try to set achievable targets. Do not set like 100 times more or 200 times more, like crazy numbers. Let's recap and give some examples. Let me repeat. If my agent's buying power is under government inflation, which is the 3.5%, the highest number in the last 12 months in the United States, I am losing so much buying power and getting poor. If it is under the street inflation, it is not horrible, but still I am losing buying power. Once my agent's buying power over government and street inflations, finally I am protecting my investments, my buying power, and start gaining some purchasing power. It is great. But remember, my main aim is to gain wealth. I need to reach my personal targets to be really wealthier. This is the only way to increase truly my buying power and get richer and wealthier. Let's run a full example here so you will understand everything clearly. I bought 4 shares of Apple stock at the price of $206 here. Since I bought the stocks, 144 days have passed. Very simple and clear. Today, the Apple stock is trading at $255. I gained like 24% actual real profit. If I divide 24% with 144 days, it makes around an average 0.167% profit per day on average. If I multiply this 0.167% profit per day with 365 days, I will find my buying power, which is the 61%. So if this stock continues like this the whole year, at the end of the year, it is expected to make 61%. Simple as that. Extremely simple math. Please do not get confused here. 61% beats okay, great, super, and insanity targets, all of them. So I beat government inflation, street inflation, my personal target 1 and personal target 2. It means that with this Apple stock, with this agent, obtaining great buying power, it is just amazing. Imagine that you live in Turkey, which experiences a massive inflation surge in the recent years. You live there, use the Turkish lira as currency, and invest in Turkish stocks. So, our highest inflation number in the last 12 months, as you can see, 75%, which is crazy but true. So the 75 will be my base as 1x multiplier. My research on the street shows that all the people in the street feel the inflation of 1.5 more than government inflation. So this will be my street inflation. Then I set my personal targets as 2 and 3. And you may ask why. Because when I look at the price changes, the grocery, utilities, house prices, if I can make 2 or 3 more times than government declared inflation, I am gaining a real wealth here, increasing my buying power up to a real good point. Please watch this video 3-4 times to understand it really well. So at the end, our setting 3 is all about setting your inflation targets right and trying to beat multiple inflation numbers to acquire more buying power. This is the only way to get really wealthier and richer.